Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants? I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back, man. Got another great video for you guys today. As usual, man, you guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about setting the record straight, stopping the lies, stopping the narratives, stopping them from rewriting history, guys. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the credibility of Dr. J and the innovative ABA League. That's right, guys. This is a member-requested video from a subscriber. So shout out to my man Carlos Rivera that sent me an email asking me about this topic and asking me if it was worth doing a video on. And absolutely, anytime that I can talk about Dr. J, you know, I'm going to do a video on it, man, because you guys know how I feel about Dr. J, man. I feel like he's a disrespected all-time great by a lot of the, newer age NBA fans out there, man. And part of the reason is because of the ABA years. A lot of the new NBA fans don't really respect the ABA's history. They don't really know the ABA. So in this video, we're going to put some respect on Dr. J, but not only Dr. J, we're going to focus a lot on the ABA and the innovations of the ABA and how the ABA was an actual really good, credible league. And that the ABA statistics, the accolades that these guys accomplished, the things that they did in the ABA absolutely counts, guys, to their all-time great resumes, man. So much respect to Carlos Rivera for requesting this video, and much respect to all you guys out there. You guys, once again, I want to thank you guys, everyone across the world, everyone across the states has been supporting my channel, man. You guys know I'm truly humbled by this, man. It really means a lot. You guys email me and message me, and like I said, ask my opinion on this stuff. That's truly humbling, guys, for real, man. So thank you very much. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So yes, guys, like I said, we're going to continue the education in this video. We're going to be talking about Dr. J and the ABA, the credibility of the ABA versus the NBA, and how a lot of people don't really count the ABA stats or the accolades or the accomplishments of a lot of these great players that that they got in the ABA. And like I said, Dr. J more specifically is what I was asked. So once again, shout out to Carlos Rivera for asking me this question, asking me about Dr. J and his overall resume, and do I count the ABA years? Now, you guys know that I do. I have Dr. J in my top 10. And when I first came on YouTube, I was actually shocked at how many people never brought up Dr. J in top 10 lists, top 5 lists. You never heard Dr. J's name ever come up, really. Like, only like the true hardcore basketball fans, maybe the New York City people, they would include Dr. J in these lists. But I was actually shocked how often I never heard Dr. J's name come up. There were a lot of guys that I've told you on this channel that I'm actually shocked don't get brought up more often. The Jerry Wests, right? We talked about these guys. Even Elgin Baylor's name doesn't get brought up enough, I feel. But when we think about Dr. J and we think about his overall career, a lot of people, forget that he played in the NBA, or a lot of people don't really count the ABA, right? They'll look at the ABA as like a secondary league. When in reality, guys, the ABA was a legit league, guys. I'm telling you guys right now. Now, I did some research on this because this is what I do for you guys. I look into these things. I do the homework. I do the research so that I can break it down and explain it to you guys in a way that you can take it back, in your mind. And like I said, you could spread this stuff out, share the information with other people, guys. But I'm going to give you the facts here, all right? So I wrote down a bunch of stuff here, guys, that I looked into about the ABA and the validity, like I said, of the ABA, the credibility of this league. Was it a legit league, or was it just a bunch of second-rate players that couldn't make the NBA playing in the ABA, guys? Now, off the jump, that's a hell no. These are legit all-time great players that play in the ABA, guys. So it wasn't just some second-rate guys that couldn't make the NBA that played in the ABA, because the ABA had less regulations on it, let's say. They didn't follow a lot of the rules of the NBA. The ABA was known as the outlaw league, right? They did kind of things by the seat of their pants, right? Spontaneous, right? They were different, right? They were trying to be a different than the NBA. So they would go after players in college. They had no problems, trying to sign players before they even graduated, before they even left school. So a lot of times the ABA had a leg up on the NBA, getting a lot of this young talent coming out of college, guys. All right? So we have to keep these things in mind. Now, Carlos Rivera asked me specifically about Dr. J, the credibility, and his ABA resume. Do I count the ABA resume? Should we count the ABA resume for these great players, someone like Dr. J? Because if you include the ABA with his NBA resume, I mean, my goodness, that's why, someone like Dr. J would be considered a 3-time champion, not a 1-time champion, a 4-time MVP award winner, Dr. J, if you include the ABA and the NBA together. And I absolutely do, because like I told you guys, and I'm going to show and highlight, the ABA was a legit league, guys, a legit league, man. Now, let's just go through some of the facts here of the historical facts for the ABA. The ABA started in 1967 and it went to 1976. Remember, the merger in the 1976 season. So the ABA's final season was 1976, right? That's when they merged with the NBA, and the first season of the merger would be the 76-77 season, guys, all right? So back in the day when I was growing up, oftentimes they would have stats or they would put something on the screen and they would have an asterisk, and the asterisk would indicate before the merger. And oftentimes they did this to give Wilt Chamberlain the respect that he deserved, because there was no one really coming close to the numbers and the things that he did, right? So they had to always put an asterisk. Then I've told you guys about this before on my channel. And the asterisk would say before the merger or since the merger. All right. So remember that 1967, 1976 was the ABA was in existence. 9 full seasons of the ABA. All right. 9 full seasons, guys. I believe, I want to say it started with, let me see if I wrote this down. They started with, I believe, 11 teams in the 1967 season. And I believe the first 5 years of the ABA, they had 11 teams, all right? Which is actually pretty good when you think about how many teams the NBA had it when it started as the BAA. They didn't even have that many teams. So they had 11 teams, then I believe it went down to 10 teams, then it went down to 9 teams. And I believe the final season or two, the last maybe, I'm going to say, maybe the last 2 seasons, there were 7 teams in the ABA, all right? So it started with 11 teams, went down to 7 in the last year or two in the ABA. Now, if you guys remember, when they had the merger with the NBA, there was a merger there, right? 4 teams were absorbed by the NBA, and the rest of the teams, the other 3 teams at the time that was still left in the ABA, they all, were gone. They were disassembled, disbanded, whatever you want to call it, right? They were just gone. And the ABA itself was gone, never to be heard from again. So if we think about that, the 4 teams that came into the NBA were the New York Nets, the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, and the San Antonio Spurs, all right? Those are the 4 teams that would come over to the NBA. And remember, I believe the New York Nets would end up becoming the New Jersey Nets, right? We all remember this, guys. You know what's interesting about the Dr. J scenario is, if I remember correctly, the New York Knicks didn't want to spend the money to get Dr. J, to acquire Dr. J. They didn't want to spend the money to get Dr. J. I remember doing some research on that. I found that interesting. The Knicks, man, been jacking things up since the 70s. But anyway, those are the 4 teams that would come into the NBA. Those are the 4 most successful teams, then those are the teams that the NBA would absorb, right? They had good fan bases. The teams were quality. So those are the teams that came over. Remember, the Indiana Pacers were 3-time champions of the ABA. And I believe they had the most championships. So there were 9 championships, 9 seasons. The Indiana Pacers won 3 of those championships. Dr. J led the New York Nets to 2 of those championships. And the last season, 1976 season, was Dr. J's New York Nets winning the championship in the final season. So when we think about the ABA and we're talking about, did it have any credibility, the ABA? Was it a legit league, guys? And I'm here to tell you the ABA was a legit league with legit all-time great players. Now, if we think about the ABA and, the reasons why some people may not, count it or think that it's a legit league is because they just don't know. Because even I did not know some of the facts I'm going to give you in this video, guys. I did not know until I looked into this stuff. So sometimes I tell you guys, you have to do the research. You have to do the homework. You have to listen to people that know more than you, people who know about this stuff. You have to listen to them and understand what they're trying to say. For a lot of the younger fans out here, as far as basketball goes, even for young kids like me, when I was growing up in the 90s and the 80s, we didn't really know about the ABA like that. But I also never heard people tearing down the ABA. People always, like I said, around where I was, people talked about the ABA in almost like an excitement, right? Because the ABA, that's what it was. It was exciting. It was different. So the ABA was known, I told you, as the Outlaw League, the Lively League. They used to call it the Lively League. Remember, they had the red and white ball, right? The blue, red, and white ball. We get all that. It was, it was known for being wild and wacky. The alley-oops, the high flyers, the dazzling outfits that these guys would wear. Some of the things that were going during the halftimes. They had a bunch of weird promotions. You guys probably remember that movie, what is it called? The Tropics or the Flint Tropics, or I can't remember what it's called. The thing with Will Ferrell, right? Jackie Moon, the Flint Tropics or whatever. You know that movie I'm talking about, guys. I'm jacking up. I'm doing a blank here on the movie. But in that movie, it's essentially an ABA, a movie, but it's talking about the ABA and stuff. So when you think about some of the things that he would do in that movie, right? The half-court shots, and you get the big check. And remember, the guy hits the shot and he has to give him the check, and it's like a whole thing. Like, they had the wrestling bear. This is from the ABA, guys. They actually had the wrestling bear at a halftime of one of the games. It was a Victor the Wrestling Bear. I don't know if this was in Indiana or wherever this was. They had Victor the Wrestling Bear. He would wrestle some people. This might have been in Indiana. But they had different kinds of gimmicks for the league, because at the beginning of the league, they were trying to, right, get people to come in, people to watch it. They're trying to compete with the NBA. So those first couple of seasons were crazy for the ABA. It wasn't that great of a league those first couple of years. It was known for being a lesser league, right? But the ABA would develop, right? They would start to get players. They would start to get fans. They would start to get some popularity, right? Because they had the flash. They had the personalities. They had the flair. The game was there. Like I said, the swag of these guys brought people in. The excitement of the league, it was different than the NBA that was known for being more boring and bland. The ABA was supposed to be more exciting, right? More unpredictable, more spontaneous, right? More up and down. Like, that's the way it was supposed to be. The players were viewed that way. And like I said, they had many gimmicks. They actually had ball girls. I think it was the Miami Floridians was the name of the team. And they had ball girls, like the Dallas Cowboys or the Dallas Cheerleaders. You guys remember that? They have the ball girls. The Miami Floridians had ball girls. They would wear like bikinis and stuff like that. And they would be out there, during the warm-ups, and they would put on like a halftime show. And, these are the kinds of things that they had to try to get people to come to the games. They would have ball girls. I remember I read a story about a girl named Penny Ann Early. She was actually the first female and the only female to this day to play in a professional basketball league, a men's professional league. She actually played, it was like for a couple of seconds. I can't remember what team it was that she played on. So supposedly, I want to say this might have been in, can't remember what, but it was in the late 60s. Anyway, this lady, Penny Ann Early, she became the first female horse jockey, I guess, licensed female horse jockey. So I guess the story goes that a lot of the men out there, right, the horse jockeys, the men, were not cool with this. So I guess they boycotted the races. She was supposed to race, I guess, in Churchill Downs, and they boycotted these 3 races that she was supposed to be in as the first female horse jockey. They didn't want to race against a female, right? We know how people acted back in the days. It was really weird. So they didn't want to race with her. So they boycotted the races. So I can't remember if it was Indiana. I can't remember what it was. There was some team that heard about this, right? And they wanted to do something right. They wanted to do something nice for this woman. So they invited her to and signed her to the team. They signed her to the basketball team so that she can, like I said, because of what was going on with the boycotting and the races and all that. So anyway, they threw her out there, and she ended up playing a couple of seconds on this court. This is the ABA, guys. These are the kinds of things that the ABA did because they were trying to bring popularity in. They were trying to get fans. They were trying to get known. They're battling against the NBA, right? The big brother. So these are all the kinds of things that they would do. When you think about the ABA, like I said, they were known for their players, the high flyers, the way these guys played the game. But they were also known for what? The afros, the big hair. We all know Dr. J and Dr. J's afro, but I believe there was a guy named Darnell Hillman who was known for having the biggest and coolest afro in the ABA. Darnell Hillman, I believe his nickname was Dr. Dunk. He actually won in 1997, guys. There was a reunion, an ABA reunion in 1997. I believe this was in Indiana. They had this. Indiana's a big basketball place. And they had this reunion. I believe it was 1997 ABA reunion. And they gave out awards. And during that presentation, that ceremony, they gave Darnell Hillman the Best Fro Award for the ABA's history, guys. So when we talk about the afros and the style of game that these guys played and the swag and the flashy clothing, this is what made the ABA popular. This is what started to get people coming to look at the ABA games and started to recognize some of these players, like a Darnell Hillman and their hair. Like I said, it was different from the ABA, guys. We know about the afros, right? This is what these guys did back in the day, man. This is part of their style, part of their swag. And I want you guys to think about some of these ABA players. These guys were playing in this league that had low attendance, right? When the league first started out. I mean, even at the max level, at the best the ABA was, it was never on the level of the NBA as far as the people coming in and the national TV coverage or the local TV coverage. The ABA didn't have any of this stuff. So a lot of times these guys were playing in these gyms and, in these places, there was barely anybody watching these games. But these guys were going out there and they were giving the effort. They were still playing the game because they're playing the game that they loved, man. And that's what it was about for these guys. Go out there and put on a show, man. Do their thing. So they had low attendance there. They didn't get the TV coverage and, all that kind of stuff. But these guys still went out there and they kept that league going those first 2-3 years. Like I said, when they were still trying to build up some popularity, some notoriety. And, when we think about the great players that played in the ABA, I don't think a lot of people understand the quality of players that play in the ABA, guys. We're talking about some of the all-time great players that played. And we're talking about some of the coolest players, some of the flashiest game players that we've ever seen. Like I said, some of the swaggiest players that we've ever seen. Icons. That's what some of these guys were, man. So obviously we all know Dr. J, man, the icon of icons, the greatest player of the ABA's history as far as I'm concerned. And we talk about the lineage, what he brought, to the game. Like I said, learning from guys like Elgin Baylor, right? And then taking it a step further, right? And then passing the torch to someone like a Michael Jordan, right? We talked about the lineage and what Dr. J meant to the game, guys. I mean, my goodness, the icon of Dr. J. Like I said, Rucker Park legend, man, street legend, had people climbing buildings, climbing trees, fences, just to watch him play in the street, man. This is what he did. This is why I tell you guys, without Dr. J coming to the NBA, where's the NBA, man? The ABA was a legit league. So we think about guys like Dr. J, Connie Hawkins, Iceman Gervin, David Thompson, George McGinnis, Artis Gilmore, Moses Malone, Roger Brown, who by all intents, man, is, like I said, another New York City legend. I believe he has several records of the ABA. I think he had 21 shots in a row in an ABA game. Just another New York City legend, Roger Brown, one of the great players from the ABA, never gets mentioned. Dan Issel. These are a lot of the guys. Zelmo Betty, who led I want to say it was the Pipers to their first championship. Billy Cunningham, the Kangaroo Kid. Louis Dampier, who I believe played every single season in the ABA, played all 9 seasons of ABA. I believe there was only about 3 or 4 players, guys, to play every ABA season. Louis Dampier was one of them. Spencer Hayward, another great player. Larry Brown. A lot of you guys forget about Larry Brown, and this is going to take me into my next point here. So now I mentioned, right, all of these great players that play in the ABA. Now, you heard some of those names. Artis Gilmore, who's arguably one of the strongest players in the history of the game. Moses Malone, right? We talk about how great Moses Malone was. All these guys started at least 1 year in the ABA before they went to the NBA. David Skywalker Thompson, right? You remember David Skywalker? This guy was doing things that Dr. J could do at 3 to 4 inches shorter, though. I mean, just a crazy vertical leap, the high fly ability of David Skywalker Thompson, man. You guys have heard Michael Jordan talk about David Thompson many, many, many times, right? He inducted him into the Hall of Fame. This was Michael Jordan, how he felt about David Thompson. Iceman, does anybody have a cooler, smoother, flashier game than Iceman? I mean, the dude is just cool as hell. The Iceman with the finger roll, the overall scoring ability, the way that he can move smooth and fluidly on the basketball court. A lot of people forget that Dr. J and Iceman Gervin played 1 year together on the Virginia Squires, if I remember correctly, when Iceman was like 20 years old and Dr. J was like, I want to say Dr. J was like 23 or something like that. They played 1 season together when Iceman was a rookie, man. And then, Iceman got moved over to the San Antonio Spurs. But, I mean, just think about some of the names of the guys I mentioned. Like I said, Connie Hawkins. You guys have probably seen video of Connie Hawkins. We always laugh and marvel at Michael Jordan, Dr. J with the giant hands, right? And these guys could control that ball and manipulate it in the air and do all these weird things. And you see Michael Jordan with the ball fakes and he'll hold it behind his back and over his head and he'll fake guys out. And we always marvel at this stuff that Michael Jordan could do. Connie Hawkins was doing these things before Michael Jordan, guys. All right, Connie Hawkins was doing this stuff in the ABA, moving the ball all over the place, holding it down like this and going past guys, moving the ball, dunking. I mean, these guys, Connie Hawkins was doing this kind of stuff, man. This the lineage we're talking about, right? Guys passing the torch, right? Adding to the game, right? Bringing their own style and flair and pizzazz and swag to it. So shout out to Connie Hawkins, man. But like I said, when we think about some of the great players, like I said, leading me into the coaches, right? There are some great coaches that coach in the ABA. Guys like Bill Sharman coached in the ABA. Slick Leonard was probably the most notable coach of the ABA. He was the Indiana Pacers head coach for those 3 championships. Slick Leonard. So shout out to these guys. But Hubie Brown, guys, started out in the ABA coaching the Kentucky Colonels, I want to say, Artis Gilmore's team. Hubie Brown coached them to the title. What was that, 1975, I want to say, the year before the last season of the ABA, the Kentucky Colonels won the championship. Hubie Brown, the great Hubie Brown, the guy who's educated so many of us over the years, that Hubie Brown started out in the ABA as a coach in the ABA. Like I said, coaching guys like Artis Gilmore on the Kentucky Colonels. Also, shout out to, once again, Hubie Brown. But do you guys also realize that Larry Brown, remember Larry Brown? Yes, that same Larry Brown that coached the Philadelphia Sixers with Allen Iverson to the finals, the same Larry Brown that coached the Detroit Pistons to the championship in 2004, that Larry Brown was an actual player in the ABA, guys. I didn't even know that. I did not know that Larry Brown was a baller like that. Larry Brown actually led the ABA in assists, I want to say 3 years. So Larry Brown was a point guard, right? You guys have seen Larry Brown, not a big guy, but Larry Brown was a point guard for the ABA. Like I said, by all accounts, he was actually a really good point guard. Like I said, led the league in assists several times. So shout out to Larry Brown, who was a player in the ABA, but not also only a player in the ABA, he started coaching in the ABA. All right, Larry Brown, I want to say, was the coach of the Denver Nuggets towards the end of the ABA. All right, guys? So shout out to Larry Brown, Hubie Brown, who started off in the ABA, guys. These are great coaches, man. So now, I want to go over some of the teams. I'm going to read off some of the names of the teams, guys. I know the video's getting a little bit long here. It's going to be a little bit longer, but bear with me because I'm going to educate you guys further. We're going to come to a conclusion here. Some of the teams that were in the ABA, guys, I believe there was like 30 different teams. Some of the teams were the same team, but they moved to different locations, or they just renamed the team, but it was in the same city, all right? So you have the Anaheim Amigos, right? You have the Baltimore Claws, which is funny because the Baltimore Claws were actually called the Baltimore Hustlers first, but the ABA didn't like that name, Hustlers. So they were like, no, you guys can't do that. And they changed the name to the Baltimore Claws. You know what's really funny with Baltimore? You think about it. You had the Baltimore Bullets, right? Then they were the Washington Bullets, but then they didn't want the Bullets, right? Oh, there's violence and guns. So let's change it to the Wizards. So now the Washington Wizards, like to me, it's one of the dumbest names in the NBA. I've always hated the Wizards name. To me, it's a dumb name. I don't like the colors. Go back to there's nothing wrong with the Bullets name. It's Bullets, man. Like, what are we doing here? But anyway, I just thought that was funny that the Baltimore Claws were the Hustlers, the Baltimore Hustlers. I'm a hustler, baby. Anyway, the Carolina Cougars, which is actually a pretty cool name. They actually, the symbol actually looked like a Pink Panther almost. But shout out to Carolina Cougars. The Dallas Chaparrals. The Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets were also once the Denver Rockets. So before they were the Denver Nuggets, they were the Denver Rockets. All right, guys? And they went to the Denver Nuggets, and then they came to the NBA. I talked to you guys about the Floridians. They were called the Floridians first. Then they were called the Miami Floridians. All right? Then you have the Houston Mavericks, which is funny. The Houston Rockets and the Dallas Mavericks combined. The Houston Mavericks, guys, you had them. The Indiana Pacers, the Kentucky Colonels that I mentioned, the LA Stars, the Memphis Pros, the Memphis Tams, the Memphis Sounds, the Minnesota Huskies, the Minnesota Pipers, the New Jersey Americans. I thought that was a pretty cool one. The New Orleans Bucks. I think that's a cool one. The New York Nets. The Oakland Oaks. That's a cool name. The Pittsburgh Condors. The Pittsburgh Pipers. The San Antonio Spurs. The San Diego Conquistadors. I think that's a cool name. The San Diego Sails. Right? Remember, the San Diego Sails. And you remember the Buffalo Braves became the San Diego Sails, I think, and then they became the San Diego Clippers, all right? But they're the San Diego Sails team in the ABA. The Spirits of St. Louis, another cool name. You guys have probably seen that. The Spirits of St. Louis. The Texas Chaparrals. The Utah Stars. That's a cool name. The Virginia Squires. That's a cool name. That's where Dr. J started his ABA career on the Virginia Squires. and the Washington Caps. Those were all the teams that were at one point in time in the ABA, guys. Some of those teams only lasted a year. Some of those teams didn't even last a year. Some of those last teams lasted a couple of years. Like I said, you had the mainstays, the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, the New York Nets, San Antonio Spurs, right? These are some of the mainstays. Now, I want to go and give you guys the facts here and what we really wanted to focus on, or answer the question to my man Carlos Rivera. Was the ABA better or as good as the NBA? Should the ABA be counted? Now, let's think about it this way. Where's the NBA today, guys, without the ABA? Where's the NBA today? It's nowhere, because what we've seen in the NBA today is it's all three-point shooting. Well, that's where they got it from the ABA. It didn't come from the NBA. The ABA, they got the three-point line adopted from the ABA. So if we just think about this current state of NBA, the last 5 years or so, this era, what would it look like without the three-point line, right? All of a sudden, these guys wouldn't be able to chuck all these threes up. Who knows what the game would look like? So the game today that people want us to celebrate could only be celebrated, could only be in existence because of the ABA. Once again, the ABA, the innovative ABA with the three-point line. So let's think about that off the jump, guys. But let's take it a step further here, guys. Did you guys know, because I sure as hell didn't know this, that the ABA and the NBA played against each other, guys, in exhibition games from 1971 to 1975, guys. That's right. I didn't even realize this. She had exhibition games between NBA teams and ABA teams. Now, I don't have the list of all the games and who won what and the scores and stats and all this stuff. This is irrelevant, because what's the main point here that my man Carlos Rivera was asking me, and a lot of you guys are probably wondering, was the ABA a legit league? And from by all accounts, everything that I've read so far, the players make it legit, right? The guys that I've mentioned, these are some of the greatest players of all time, guys, that played in this league. And a lot of these guys, like I said, all those guys I mentioned started out in the ABA and then went to the ABA, to the NBA. So if we think about that alone, that shows that it was a quality league because you had quality players. But let's think about how the game was played. The game was high flying. It was more exciting. It was more up and down, right? It was more loose, more wild. With the three-point line, right? It changed alley-oop dunking, right? If you think about the NBA when it first started out, I mean, remember they used to tell Will Chamberlain he couldn't dunk the ball like that. They frowned up at dunking. They frowned upon this stuff. It wasn't like that. Not the ABA. The ABA was all about the alley-oops, the slam dunks, the high-flying ability. These guys showing their crazy skills, manipulating their body in the space and the air. And that's what the ABA wanted, man, right? So from 1971 to 1975, the ABA and the NBA played against each other, guys. All right? Now, I believe like the first year or two, I'm going to say the first 2 years. So like, let's say 1971, 1972. So I want to say there was like 5 years that they played together, right? 5 seasons. The first 2 seasons, the NBA dominated the ABA. The NBA dominated, man, because I told you, when we talk about they come in existence in 1967, those first 3-4 years, they're trying to build up their brand. They're building up the ABA. You're trying to get players to come there. You're trying to get them out of college. You're trying to get people to come watch the game. You want people to believe in your league and to respect your league. Players are not going to come play in your league if they don't respect it, if it's not legit. So just off of that alone, the players that I mentioned that played in the ABA give credence to the ABA. Why would those guys go play in that league if it wasn't legit? If it wasn't a league that they thought that they can shine in, get money, showcase their skills, right? If it wasn't legit. How would you get a Dr. J? How would you get the Roger Browns, the Zelmo Bettys, and all these guys that played, the Moses Malones, the Iceman Gervins, right? George McGinnis. All these guys that played in the ABA, why would these guys play in the ABA if it wasn't a legit league? But in the head-to-head matchups, like I said, the NBA dominated those first 2 years, guys. The record was 42-17. All right, so the NBA won 42 games and the ABA won 17 games. It's pretty lopsided right there. That pretty much shows the ABA is a joke of a league compared to the NBA. Maybe not as competitive, maybe not overall as skilled, as balanced, as good. That's what it looked like. And by all accounts, that was the facts. The first 3-4 years, like I said, the ABA resistance, they struggled. They weren't that great. They didn't have the best players at the time. They didn't have the best big men. It was hard for them to get the centers, the big guys in the ABA. But over the last 3 seasons, guys, that they had exhibition games. So we're talking about 73, 74, and 75, guys. Basically the middle of the 70s, let's say. The ABA dominated the NBA, guys, in these such games. All right? Over the next 3 seasons, guys, the ABA would win 62 games and the NBA would win 34. So almost doubling their win total over the next 3 seasons, guys, proving and highlighting that the ABA was a legit league, man, that they're legit players and they were just as good, if not better than the ABA. By all accounts, by 73, 74, 75, the ABA was a better league, guys. Why do you think the NBA took them in? You know, a lot of times in business, you'll see what? Companies merge, right? They merge. Like a company will buy another company out. But why are they doing this? Because they realize the value in that company. They're taking away from them. So like, hey, listen, we can get rid of this by just buying these people and merging with them because we could use what they have. Maybe their technology is a little bit better. Maybe they have an infrastructure that might be better than this. Whatever it is, the ABA had that. They had the excitement. They had the high flyers. They had the players. They had the skills, and they had the overall game. They had the three-point line. They were different. The ABA used a 30-second shot clock, not a 24-second shot clock. That makes the game a little different, right? All of a sudden, now you have more time to shoot the ball, right? It's a different game a little bit, right? They change it up, so it's not the exact same thing, but they never changed the actual game itself, right? So the courts never changed. The rim was always 10 feet. It wasn't a gimmick league. It wasn't as if they lowered the rims to 9 feet to make these guys look greater or to make them appear like they were high flyers, right? That would be a gimmick league. That would be like, oh, the ABA is a joke. You can't really include the ABA. The court was smaller. The rims were lower. But that's not the case. All the dimensions, everything stayed the same, right? The ball was the same. It was just a different color. But they didn't make the ball smaller or make the ball bigger, right? Like I said, they didn't make the rim bigger or make the rim small. They didn't raise it up or lower it down, right? They had a three-point line that they instituted. But everything else was the same. As a matter of fact, I think the last year of the ABA's existence, guys, the 1975-76 season, they had no foul outs. If I remember correctly, if I looked into that, am I correct about this? The last season, the ABA had no foul outs. So after you got your 6th foul, the team would get 2 free throws and possession of the ball for every foul after your 6th foul. That's what they did that final season, guys. Once again, the ABA always, trying to be innovative. And like I said, look what the three-point line has done for the league. Now, we get it. The three-point line has been abused, and it's kind of taken away from the league now. But if you think about the 1990s, guys, and what the three-point line did, remember, it got instituted in the 80s, and then to me, by the 90s, it was balanced. It was being used in a balanced way. It was being used strategically, whereas now, it's being used all the time. So there's no strategy behind it. So yeah, you might have some teams in the 90s that shot more threes than others. That was maybe their strategy because maybe they had shooters. Most of the teams in the 80s and 90s, you usually would conform to the players you had. So you can only play a certain play style based off of your personnel. Now everyone thinks they have personnel to shoot threes. Everyone thinks they have personnel to do this when they don't. So the game plan is balanced. All right, so let's think about that. But like I said, so now overall, guys, the NBA versus the ABA. 5 seasons, guys. The ABA won the head-to-head matchup 79-76, guys. 3 games, 79-76. And like I said, over the last 3 seasons, they dominated the NBA 62-34 in head-to-head matchups, guys. Domination. That's why the merger happened. All right, who was the greatest player in the 70s when the merger happened in the NBA? The greatest player was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Man already had 3 or 4 MVPs by that point. Had already been a champion. Greatest player in the league, right? Voted on by the players. By 1972, by 1973, by 1974, by 1975, right? Will Chamberlain's gone. Bill Russell's gone. Jerry West is gone, right? The Oscar Robertsons, these guys are phasing out. Bob Pett, all these guys are gone. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar taking over in the 70s, right? But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's game is basic, boring, and bland, man. It ain't like that, right? He had the sky hook. He had the down low moves, but he was a center. And he didn't have the flash. He didn't have the personality. He didn't have the swag of a Dr. J. So I always tell you guys, part of Dr. J's icon is him coming into the NBA during the merger and uplifting the league, saving the league, keeping it afloat to the 80s, where guys like Magic Johnson, the Larry Birds, right, and a bunch of other great players would come and then push the game forward. But it was Dr. J saving it because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar couldn't save the league. He's not exciting. That's why the ABA was becoming more popular and had better players. and greater teams. It was just a better league by 74, 75, guys. It was a better league. And those numbers prove that. So as you guys can see, yes, the ABA was better than the NBA for those couple of years there in the mid-70s, guys. And that's part of the reason why they did the merger. They had to get some of these guys over to the league. They had to get some of these teams. They needed that style. They needed the flair. They needed those guys. So as you guys can see, man, I know this video went super long, but much respect to Carlos Rivera for asking me this. Shout out to the legend Dr. J. You know, he'll always be in my top 10, guys, and he'll always be on my Mount Rushmore, Dr. J, because what he meant to the game. And his resume in the ABA should be combined with the NBA is legit league. A legit league that Dr. J played in against legit competition, guys. And like I said, it wasn't a gimmick league. It was a different league. It was another league, but it wasn't a gimmick league. It was legit basketball being played there with legit greats. Think about the names that I read off, guys. Those are legit great players. Those aren't also Rans or so-so guys or second-tier Hall of Famers. These are great, great players, man. All right, that deserve our respect. And the ABA deserves the respect of the people out there, basketball fans. I always tell you guys, I don't say the true NBA fans. I say the true basketball fans. Because it's basketball. It's the Basketball Hall of Fame, not the NBA Hall of Fame. So these ABA players, the league itself was legit. And I gave you guys facts here. I gave you guys numbers. I gave you guys a lot of information that proves that the NBA or the ABA may have been a joke or maybe even seen as a gimmick those first 3-4 years in existence. But over the last 5 seasons, they showed and proved that they were a legit league. And I told you, over the last 3 years, you can argue they were better than the NBA just overall, talent-wise, flash-wise, box office-wise. They were a better league, guys. And like I said, think about some of the coaches that I mentioned that came out of there. Insane. So shout out to all you guys out there. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.